we did last night.
Hello?
It's on. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm using the microphone because I understand we need to, because it's also on Facebook Live. So anyway, I have the microphone here. It's a little intimidating sitting in a classroom auditorium again. It kind of brings me back to college, and I'm about to break out in a cold sweat. But anyway, appreciate you guys coming out tonight. The announcement that we made a few weeks ago, or now almost a month ago, has really been received well throughout Denton and Denton County and our community. I've heard a lot of very favorable comments and gathered a lot of good feedback. And so maybe that's one of the reasons that we're not just packed tonight, because people trust what we're doing. But for those of you that are here, we hope we get plenty of questions and have a chance to answer everything you say. So I'm Bill Patterson. I'm the publisher and the owner of the Denton Record-Chronicle, Denton Media Company. We also have Nico Leone from KERA. He's the president and CEO. We have Fraser Nelson, who's the managing director of the National Trust for Local News. We have Sean McCrory, executive editor of the Denton Record-Chronicle, and Gilbert Bayonne, the executive editor of KERA News. I was close. I got pretty close on all that. Wanted to just give you a brief. I want to really let Nico and Fraser talk, but just a little brief on what's going on, or from my perspective, what's happened. So, our family owned the Record-Chronicle from 1945 till 1999. Sold it to A.H. Belo. I stayed on, published the paper. We were part of A.H. Belo from 1999 until in 2017, Belo had pretty much gotten rid of all their newspapers. You know, they had about, at one time they had about 9 or 10 newspapers, and they started getting rid of those. They had transitioned out of the TV business, so it was down to the Dallas Morning News and the Denton Record-Chronicle. Well, we're nothing but a rounding error when it comes to dealing with the Dallas Morning News, and we operate completely differently. So as that all happened and we were looking at some of the challenges before us, I talked to the publisher of the Dallas Morning News and just said, hey, if you guys are ever interested in selling the Denton Record-Chronicle, I'm interested in buying it back, because I want to make sure that we have community journalism in this town, not only then, now, but forever. And so when we did that, we got that deal done, and so we started Denton Media Company in January of 2018. So we spent 2018 getting all our systems in place and getting set and getting our staffing all lined up for everything. 2019 comes, and so I started looking at what we need to do to go forward, again, to be a sustainable news operation. It became quite apparent during the year of 2019 that for us to think we're going to be a printed newspaper company long term was foolish. We spent probably into 6 figures trying to sell print subscriptions the whole year of 2019, and we had very little luck. We would sell somebody on a little package, and then as the day that thing was up, they were done. And we hadn't done enough to promote our internet and our digital operation. So we decided in 2019, about the middle of the year, that that's the way we were going to head in 2020. And our plan was to cut that over in May of 2020, right after the city and school board elections. All this was before COVID. So we started doing some marketing in the fall of 2019. We got an app set up. We started getting people to try to register for access to our website and doing all those things leading up to it. COVID hit. COVID was terrible, but one thing we discovered as we were getting ready for this is it got a lot of people a whole lot more used to using computers and operating computers and laptops and desktops and phones and all that kind of stuff to get their content. We went ahead with our cutover in May of that year. We spent the better part of 4 to 5 months at least with a lot of people that really didn't like what we decided to do. I mean, really didn't like what we decided to do. But we tried to deal with it the best we could, and we asked people, just give it a chance, give it a try. Give it 2 or 3 weeks and just try it and see if it's something that can work for you. We had the e-replica edition, we had the website, we had all the ways to look at accessing content. And while we lost quite a few subscribers initially, we found that most of them have come back over the last couple of years. Some of them came back a lot quicker than they said they were going to, and to this day they're still coming back. And in fact, yesterday we had a 100-year-old subscriber renew her digital subscription. So for anybody that says that the older generation doesn't read and use digital technology and consume stuff digitally, they're crazy. 66% of our readers read their content right here, you know, and that's just the fact. So anyway, we went down that path, did that. So then as we go into 2021, I'm starting to think, too, about what's the future going to be here. What's the future of the Denton Record-Chronicle going to be long-term? What's the future of community journalism going to be long-term? I'm not going to do this forever. So I start trying to think about what's the next best step. I didn't want to go just sell to a traditional newspaper company. I didn't think that was the right thing to do, and I think that would have probably destroyed what we were trying to do. And I got extremely lucky when I was watching a webcast, an industry webcast, and the National Trust for Local News was making a presentation. And when I heard what they had to say and their participation and interest in growing and fundraising and growing funds for community journalism to support community journalism, take care of some of the news desert issue, and try to see what they could do to grow, it just really resonated with me, and I thought that was a great deal. So I thought, what the heck, when it was over with, I fired off an email to them. Hey, I'm from Denton. Here's who I am and what we do. If you're ever interested in talking, I'd love to talk. Well, I think by the next day I got a note back, and they said, sure, we'd love to talk. So that started a conversation for the rest of 2021 with the Trust. And then along with that, and I'm going to let these guys fill in, KERA came into the fold, and so to me that's just another exciting opportunity that's new and different and innovative in community journalism and developing a partnership between a newspaper and a broadcast operation that has a lot of reach into this community. So we're here today. I'm extremely excited about it, and the thing I'm most excited about is preserving local journalism, preserving local reporters, and continuing to try to tell and grow the story along with the support and help of KERA for years and years to come, because I think it's vital for communities to have a local news source. I think it's so vital, and there's too many of them that don't anymore. So with that, I've spent way too much time. I'm going to turn it over to Nico Leone.
Thanks, Bill, and I'll stay fairly brief, but pick things up kind of where you left off. About the same time Bill was reaching out to the folks at the National Trust, we had been connected to them as they were thinking about how to preserve good local reporting under local ownership. They were starting to think about what it would look like to work with a public media organization to help anchor that. They got connected to us. They connected us and Bill, which I think just kind of made us both giggle a little bit because we have a pretty long-standing association. You know, when I walk into our building on the north side of downtown Dallas every day, there's a bunch of bricks from the last time we built a building about 30 years ago, and one of them has the Denton Record-Chronicle's name on them. You know, Bill and his dad were both involved on our board at KERA. About 20% of our board is actually from Denton County, but we haven't really had much of a presence here. You know, we come up and do some arts events. We worked with a few folks in the community, but we haven't really been on the ground. And you know, when I started in early 2020, Bill and I had a short conversation about maybe doing some stuff together, but then COVID hit. You know, we didn't really move forward on that, and a year and a half later, we found ourselves in a conversation. And the thing I think that we're most excited about is this is a way for us to help keep good local reporting from here, for here, and then we can use our platforms to help tell those stories to the rest of the metro, the rest of the state, and the rest of the country through some of our partnerships. And more than anything else, it helps us be more representative of the community we serve. To be in Denton, we've got a partnership going in Fort Worth. We've got a pretty good-sized newsroom in Dallas, and it really helps us cover the whole metro and sound like the metro that we serve. We're excited to work with the Denton Record-Chronicle as kind of a base to expand what we do here in Denton County, not just in news, but also in arts and education and some of the other areas of our work. And I think we're going to be able to help keep the Denton Record-Chronicle locally owned and sustainable for the long term, and that's a really exciting proposition. I'll hand it over to Fraser Nelson from the National Trust, who will share just a little bit of perspective from where she sits, and then we'll take some questions. Fraser?
Thanks. Hopefully lots of questions. So I'm from a national organization called the National Trust for Local News. I live in Utah. And I don't know if you guys know that Texas has this reputation, but we understand you guys like to do big things. And this is definitely a big thing. So I want to say congratulations to our two partners, because when we announced this project nationally, we've got a lot of very positive feedback from both public media stations around the country and from newspapers around the country. We were established not quite 2 years ago by three people who had all come to this issue of how do we keep local news in local hands. We were concerned about the news deserts that we were seeing grow around the country. We were concerned about the closure of newspapers, and we were particularly concerned not so much about the big dailies. I don't wake up in the middle of the night worrying about the New York Times and the Washington Post. We wake up in the middle of the night worried about the Denton Record-Chronicle and papers around the country that have long histories of serving their communities that have really faced some headwinds in the last decade. And we were just thrilled when Bill sent us an email, because the Denton Record-Chronicle is a gem. You all know that. But when I hear from newspapers almost every day, and this is a paper that was really on the front end of trying to figure out how to remain sustainable in very rapidly changing times. Bill's made a tremendous investment in the paper. His family has a legacy in this paper. And it was wonderful to meet someone who understood that legacy and didn't want to see what his family had built diminished in any way. And then Nico is very well known nationally as a real innovator in the public media space. We didn't know that 20% of the board members were from Denton, but we knew enough to know that these two gentlemen could really come together. And, you know, I'm originally from New Jersey, so I sometimes think of myself as a little bit of a yenta. We brought them together, and, you know, it's a match made in heaven. Look at them. So what we try to do at the National Trust is bring some national resources, financing, as well as some expertise that we have about how to sustain local newspapers, and really just watch the magic happen. We want to make sure that local news stays in local hands for the long term. And I want to assure you that our role is not to come into Denton and to help create this partnership and then stay here forever and change the way things are running. This is a local activity. This is a local mission, local vision, and we're here to support, not to be, you know, not to run things. You won't have people from Utah and Boston and New York running your local newspaper, but we're here to be a partner with you all as you step forward to this really exciting future. So we're happy to answer any and all questions. We had some already earlier, and we had a small event last night where we heard from a lot of folks as well. So please, 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 just any question you have at all, let us know.
Nico, correct me if I'm wrong. The only way I think the newspaper looks different in a year or two or three than it does now is going to be in the content and the fact that we want to grow and expand content. Okay, that's the whole purpose of this. This is a fast, rapidly growing city, county, as everybody knows, and we're trying to do all we can to keep up with the growth. And in the perfect world, we'd have enough reporters to be able to do it. But this isn't the perfect world anymore. And while we still have a lot of staff compared to a lot of our peers, with so much going on all over this area, there's just a lot of growth needs. So I hope that we'll do a lot of collaborative projects over time, look at issues and opportunities, look at video, look at podcasts, look at how we continue to transition digital, because that will be the way of the future at some point in time. But the printed newspaper is here, the e-replica edition is here, and I'll let Nico speak to anything else, but I hope, if anything, you'll just see stronger reporting and sharing of content and resources.
We're thinking about this in 4 or 5 different ways. I mean, first, we don't have deep expertise in running newspapers. We certainly have some people who have made their careers in print and have moved over, but our core business is radio and television, and we've been moving into the digital space a little bit more, and that's really our point of intersection. From a content perspective, I don't think a whole lot's going to change immediately. I mean, editorial decisions are still going to be made primarily out of here. You know, a lot of the relationship that our executive editors will have is going to be a little bit more coordination. I mean, reporting still needs to come from here for here, but we'll collaborate on stories when we find issues that touch the entire metro. We'll be able to bring in some of our statewide partners to help with statewide coverage that really impacts your day-to-day lives here in Denton. But the editorial decisions will continue to primarily be made here. We'll coordinate and help tell those stories elsewhere. In terms of audience, I think we can do a lot of work to help grow, whether it's from a product standpoint, working together on things like podcasts, audio products, video products, as well as helping to market and find new readers. You know, we've got a pretty sizable audience in Denton. About 22% of the county watches KERA TV. We've got a pretty sizable footprint for KERA News. You know, our NPR news station, our music stations have a pretty good footprint here as well. So even just on our own channels, we've got a pretty sizable audience that we can cross-promote and help find new audiences. From a revenue standpoint, I think that's where the real change will be. You know, we'll be converting the Denton Record-Chronicle into a nonprofit structure that'll open up opportunity to think about revenue a little bit differently and hopefully grow it a little bit and make it sustainable for the long run. And then there'll be a lot of back office integration, which should stay pretty invisible to you as readers, but more than anything else, the content will still be from here for here, with editorial decisions being made here in Denton by people who know the community. Can you verify that, Bill?
Sure thing.
Centered around Denton Record-Chronicle and how we kept up with each other, as I was sharing with you, Nico. But we got a crisis. This partnership might help that, in that, and I share this problem with the mayor of Denton, who feels like, well, I shouldn't speak for him, but let me say I have seen him as the victim of misreporting, and I have been the victim of misreporting twice now, and it puts me in a dilemma, because the first time I suffered significant damage, and I decided I didn't want to fight the hand that feeds me, because the paper was too important. This time we may end up with a multi-million-dollar libel suit, and I'm just wondering what can be done here to work on that issue. My thought, Bill, is that money's been a problem, and maybe it's an issue of having inexperienced reporters that just don't know how to get the facts right. Maybe some extra money will allow that problem to be resolved, because truth is just essential.
Well, what you're saying that you have an issue with. So is right here, so he could certainly that you have. Okay. So I stand by our reporting, every bit of our reporting. And if we make a factual error, we do just like we always have. And if we verify the error, then we'll make a correction.
So Nico mentioned the fact that the Denton Record-Chronicle will become a nonprofit through the acquisition and the merger as it occurs. And my prior job was at the Salt Lake Tribune, where it was my first and only newspaper job, and I led the paper to become the first nonprofit newspaper in the United States. And we did that to bring additional resources to the paper, because you always want, membership, subscriptions, sponsorship, ad revenue, and philanthropy is a new way to bring additional resources to grow, as both of them have said, grow the number of reporters, grow the coverage area, be able to do more in Flower Mound and other towns to the south that are just growing rapidly. And there's programs that are available to nonprofits nationally that aren't available to for-profit entities, like Report for America, which is sort of like the Peace Corps for reporting, if you can imagine, or Teach for America. So by becoming a nonprofit, there'll be lots of ways to retain the great things that the DRC has been doing and to take advantage of people's ability to make a donation to the DRC, thereby expand its resources.
Before and after the paywall, like will more of the content be available for free for Denton residents?
I guess I'll take the first start at it. We have, the way you fund journalism anymore is through subscriptions and donations and contributions and memberships. Okay, the old model in our industry, where 80% of your revenue came from advertising and about 20% came from subscriptions, has almost flipped completely in the opposite direction. Okay, so it's important that we have revenue sources so that we can hire and retain reporters. So for the foreseeable future, and I'll let Nico talk to it, but for the foreseeable future, we will maintain the paywall strategy that we have. It's worked very well. We've lowered the price point for what a subscription is from when we were a print. We at least did that. Some newspapers go into ventures like this and they don't make any adjustments for it. So we've lowered the price point. We have grown our subscriber base significantly in the last 2 years because of the digital initiatives we have. We have nearly 400,000 unique users per month to our assets that we have. We have over 2 million page views of content per month, and we have a really robust website and mobile offering. As to when things may or may not change, I'll let Nico talk a little bit more to that.
I like how you talk about the foreseeable future and leave me to talk about the rest. But yeah, so as Bill said, we don't have an immediate plan to drop the paywall. I mean, in public media, our business model really is free and then a membership model to support that. We'd love to get to a point where we can, but as Bill said, subscribers are what really drives the business model at this point. If we get to a point where our calculation is such that we think we can sustain it with a free model using membership instead of subscribers to support it, we would love to do that. We don't have a time frame. We don't know yet if it's feasible. We've certainly seen a couple of folks move in that direction. But this is a fairly new area to explore, is the intersection of legacy newspapers and public media. So it's something we're definitely going to take a look at. We just don't really know what the exploration is going to look like. But given our history and our business model, if we can find a way to do that, we would love to.
One thing that I think a nonprofit does right away is put some content in front of the paywall that's a public service. So at the Tribune, for example, we kept our subscription costs and we kept charging people, but all of our COVID coverage was in front of the paywall. When we had our big earthquake, that was in front of the paywall. So there's ways to both keep, you don't want to get rid of what little revenue you have, right? Because then you just drive off a cliff. But there's certainly ways to make the content more accessible as a mission-driven organization. And I'm sure that these two folks are going to be continuing to figure out when and if the right moment is to go completely without the paywall, but we certainly don't have the economic modeling for that right now. What we don't want to do is harm either of these institutions in an effort to improve them. You have to be careful. We've seen some papers make the decision to drop the paywall too soon. They lost what little revenue they had, and then they were really scrambling. And these are big organizations, so they have lots of things to balance, you know, but of course the whole reason we're doing this is to keep this paper sustainable to serve your community for decades to come. So these kinds of decisions are really critically important, but as a public institution, these kinds of conversations are going to continue. You know, you become, in essence, the owners of the DRC as members of the public and nonprofit, just like you are of KERA. So having this kind of ongoing community dialogue is important decisions are made, I know, is an important value for both institutions. Do you see the one
Not for the foreseeable future. How about that for the answer? No.
Thanks, Bill.
Because I like to have the page layout, and I feel like I'm going to miss something if I read the other with just a single articles or something. But yet the paper comes in on Saturday or whatever, and I've already read it, so maybe I don't need that anymore.
Well, we are finding more and more people that are transitioning to totally digital, okay? Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I appreciate that very much. But we are seeing more and more people because of the way our model, the model we set up is a little unique for anybody else that I know of that has been trying to start to head down the direction we are, in the fact that we have a live e-edition or website 7 days a week. So the Saturday paper, as you just note, the content in it is different in a significant way most weeks than what's in the e-edition, because we have to deadline it earlier and earlier, so we can't get as late of content. But for the foreseeable future, we're still planning to print the one edition a week, and the e-edition remains a popular thing. And one of the things that's really interesting when we did all this, though, and we launched this digital kind of first deal, my assumption was most of the people that were print subscribers would just automatically transition to the e-edition because it'd be easier, they're more used to it and all that. What we've actually found is that probably 50-50 to 60-40 are kind of moving to the web-based model where they can find the headlines they want to read and read it that way. So that's something we continue to look at and evaluate. And I appreciate that.
And in the past, people would say, well, how did you know about that? And I said, it was in the paper. So maybe I got a few people across to know that. And I've seen that even recently out next door. Somebody said, how did you know that? Because, well, if you read the Denton Record-Chronicle. So it's still a thing. It's still viable. And not giving it.
Thank you for the comment.
Do I understand that this may be the first time kind of partnering, or have you seen this around the country? And the other part of that is kind of at the larger big picture. What sort of models do you foresee emerging on this? And this is real exciting, I think. And I just think that, you know, I grew up in a small town. I was in Montana for almost a month. My friend was having surgery. You know, small town newspapers there, and they have very robust statewide public media system. You know, can we test this out here and then maybe replicate it? So I guess the models that you guys talk about.
This is not a plan. I just want to. I hope someone's filming this so I can send it to the Knight Foundation. Thank you for asking that question. And it's funny you mentioned Montana because that's another state we're active in. The National Trust for Local News came into existence when we just one day, sort of with a hell and a yell, purchased 24 newspapers in Colorado. The Denver Post was decimated by a hedge fund, Alden Capital. And the owner of these 24 newspapers right outside of Denver, similar to Bill, he was looking to retire, thinking about the future really more than retiring, and had a cash offer from an equally hostile entity. And he was really worried that if he sold the papers, they would just be shut down. So one weekend we spent in New York City with lawyers, and we bought those 24 papers, fully leveraged buyout with the backing of FJC, which you probably hear their name on public radio, a family of funds. It's a Jewish endowed fund in New York City. We bought them. We created the National Trust for Local News, and we created the Colorado News Conservancy. We sort of think of ourselves as a land trust. And so we're a conservancy. We have state branches. This is not one of them because this is kind of a unique situation, but we want to have a number of different models. Our most prevalent model is the News Conservancy, where we purchase newspapers in bulk, so to speak, from a lot of different owners. We then put them in a trust that create a nonprofit, independent board of directors. We bring in some philanthropy. We acquire the newspapers. We help them transform. So all the work that Bill's already done for the Denton Record-Chronicle, the papers we buy have not done none of those things. So we help them get on digital. We help them expand their readership. We work on their editorial content, because paywall or no paywall, if it's not good content, it doesn't make any difference, right? You're not going to pay for it. You won't read it. And then we exit. We leave the community, its newspapers, in this new governance structure. So we've done that in 2 states, and we are working in Montana, New Mexico. We're looking at our next model besides this is an employee ownership model that we're looking at in Appalachia and eastern Kentucky, because there's lots and lots of nonprofits, and people don't want to lose what wealth they have in the community. So there's a way to have the employees actually take over the ownership of the papers. As far as this model goes, there is a much bigger version of this happening in Chicago, where WBEZ purchased a big daily paper in Chicago. The numbers were astronomical because it included like pension buyouts and things. This is, not on that scale, and it's quite different because it's a much more complicated transaction. This is the first time a community newspaper, a weekly, is going to be affiliated with a local strong public media station. So we've heard from public media stations around the country and are looking at a few that are interested in maybe doing this. But it takes a really innovative leader like you have here in KERA, and it takes someone who also has a lot of faith in their community's willingness and ability to see a new model forward. So I don't think it'll work everywhere, but it's certainly a model that we can see working in communities where there's a strong anchor public media station and then ancillary community papers where, they're probably not strong enough to be on their own, not in a position like the DRC. Montana is a state where that might be possible. Or with the Montana Free Press, which is a digital first paper, it's a very strong anchor.
The business news is just changing so quickly. I mean, business models are sort of colliding. None of us completely know what the future is, but we are hearing a lot of interest in seeing how this goes. And I think, much like we're learning from some of these other transactions, we think some people will learn from what we're doing here.
Sorry if I nerded out there for a minute, but you go ahead.
Something like that just for Denton County or Denton City to kind of, especially during the transition time, but possibly permanently.
We don't know quite yet, but that's one of the conversations we're having internally is we're stretching out our services a little bit. I mean, you might have seen the news that We're taking over management of WRR, the classical station that serves North Texas. We're talking about what kind of an advisory structure we need for that, as well as what structure on our board of directors itself. With Denton, we already have a sizable chunk of the board from Denton, so from a governance perspective, we feel good about that. But there'll be a point at which I think we want a more specific advisory group. We just haven't quite gotten there yet, but I think it's likely that something like that will pop up next year. You probably noticed from being involved with that group, it's really well constructed in terms of its ability to be representative of the community. And as we start showing up in different places of the community differently, that's certainly something we're going to want to continue.
Before I ask my question, can the gentleman down at the front who accused the Denton Record-Chronicle of libel and accused of libel against Stardust, so can he identify himself? Just because I think on the record he didn't, and so if it's read like later, we're not going to know who you are.
Oh, I'm Philip Young.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Philip.
You're welcome.
First off, KERA is my #1 news source since I moved here in 2001. So I appreciate what you've done for this community, North Texas, all over, especially coming from Austin that has a pretty weak public radio news station. The two biggest things that I see, I've been reading DRC since 2001. And I know when you get DRC, I know, what's opening, what's closing, who's been arrested at Walmart or selling diapers. But what I don't do a lot of, the two things I think really are important about this town, and it is the politics, the people who are running the town and who's being elected. There's some of that, but it's not as interesting as it needs to be, and the other is the arts. This is such a big arts community, and we have very little reporting on it. I was just wondering, do you plan on having beat reporters on any of those, like expanding those, or are we just going to have the reporters that are already there having to cover more on this?
Two things. I'll answer the arts first. We used to be a lot more active in the arts pre-COVID, okay? And we made some business decisions when COVID hit because of the way things structured and changed, and we're looking at how we can get that ramped back up a little bit more. And that's one of the things that I think that we'll be able to work with KERA some with their strong arts coverage and promotion to help us grow that in this marketplace. As to the political piece of it, I'll let Sean McCroy take a stab at that. He's our editor, and he can go ahead and give you his response.
As far as covering politics, we do have reporters that are assigned to politics. We have a reporter at every county commissioners meeting, a reporter at every city council meeting. We produced profiles of all the key elections in the community. One of the problems we run into is we ask questions, we don't get answers. And it's, having to use the public as much as we can as well to put pressure on politicians to answer questions. We had a number of folks that we tried to contact for our election previews that ignored us. It is not unique to Denton. It's something that we have to combat along with other media, but it is something that certainly we're mindful of. It is finding ways to present a lot of this topical coverage of different things that are going on in the community. I mean, a lot of the stuff, if you look at what was broken, it was broken through the Denton Record-Chronicle. I mean, you talk about putting, looking at some of the issues with some of the folks that are the leaders. We do certainly scrutinize some of the decisions that are made, ask questions, and try to report through public records requests and different things what is going on. Can we do more? Absolutely. I think every media source will tell you they can do more. There is certainly, I think, as we start looking at what is possible through the collaboration with KERA, certainly adding additional content is one of the things that we're very much excited about in the newsroom. There are, limits to the resources that we have as far as how far out we can go. Being able to pull in some of the coverage that KERA is already doing on some of the areas that certainly overlap. Denton County makes sense. We're going to do that. You'll see more of those stories. And one good thing that I don't think was mentioned, any of the KERA stories that we run in the Denton Record-Chronicle, all those stories will be in front of the paywall. We will make sure that you have that. And there will be more opportunities, I think, for some of the other stuff that we're doing to be in front of the paywall. But we're aspiring certainly to provide more coverage of those areas for sure.
A couple of thoughts on that. It's not just the Denton Record-Chronicle, but I think every newspaper in America has struggled with political coverage. It's been one of the huge areas that's contracted as the business has changed. About a year ago, we started doing a lot more accountability reporting, starting with a focus on Dallas. We've been working with a partner in Fort Worth on it. We've now got someone in Arlington, someone in Collin County. It's definitely an area of focus moving forward for us and something that we're looking forward to collaborating on. But in terms of arts, that's been a huge focus for us for more than a decade, both from our newsroom and from some of our other channels. There's a tremendous amount of arts programming on KERA TV. KXT is a music and arts station. WRR coming into the family. I think we're going to have a lot more ways to touch the arts community, not just through coverage, but through partnerships and events and things like that. And as we do that work, you can expect to see us show up a little bit more in Denton along the way.
KERA.
Thank you.
And my radio was set the first button for WRR, which means I'm completely bored. That being said, are the editorial policies that are presently in place for KERA going to be influenced in any way with the newspaper or vice versa? And secondly, what kind of anticipation do you have and do you see for this type of model with regard to investigative reporting? Playing off what was asked earlier.
I'll start with the second one, and then maybe you want to weigh in on the first. With investigative reporting, I think that's one of the other areas that we've seen contraction around the country at newspapers because it's really resource intensive. A lot of times you drill dry wells along the way. But that's something where, not just with us working with the Denton Record-Chronicle, but some of our national partners, we have available to us, when we get a hold of something that could be a really good story, we've got folks we can bring in and work with across the state and even nationally to help with that work. We don't have a specific plan for what that's going to look like yet. We just know that's a really good area of opportunity to explore together because of some of the resources we can bring to the table to do more of those types of works.
On the editorial coverage, Neil, and positions, we get accused of being too left and accused of being too right, depending on who wants to comment on that, and it's hard to believe, but that's how people view us. In fact, Sean, since he's been here 4 or 5 years now, 4.5 years now, he has kept tabs on our editorial page every day of the conservative and the left-leaning syndicated columnists, opinion pieces, editorial cartoons, all those kinds of things, and he makes sure that we try to keep that down the middle. As you probably noticed, we don't do a lot of local editorials anymore. Part of that's just changed with the staffing and the limitations we've had in that area. We still do some, but I think the good thing about KERA is we'll be able to collaborate and talk through things, but I don't think there'll be an editorial direction that would be drilled down from KERA to Denton.
Editorially, we're really concerned about two things. First and foremost, facts. We've got to be fact-based, full stop. And from there, we want to be local. Right? That's the work we do. That's the work we assign. That's the work Gilbert and the newsroom does every day. We work with partners across the state who are all in local markets. They're making their own decisions based on what's important to their communities, and that'll continue to be the case here.
It is a most fertile area, and I know that when it has been reported on extensively, whoever's doing it seems to have a major boost in copy, and also when it's done properly, that person is usually left Denton County very quickly afterwards. So that's why I say I think KERA has some history of remaining pretty steady, pretty good steady hand on the tiller, and I would hope that that would continue.
I think it's really important to note that there have been study after study that show that when local news goes away, shenanigans of all kinds increase. So, right. So one of the things that the National Trust for Local News brings to the table is a set of impact metrics where we're really trying to make the case nationally for community news, for news at this level, so that we can say when you invest in local news, you see these sorts of outcomes, not just what happens when it goes away, but the good benefit of it staying. And as a nonprofit, there's lots of resources like ProPublica and different types of reporting projects that this partnership will be in a very strong position to apply for. Together in a unique collaboration, you could see some national resources coming to do that kind of reporting, arts reporting, all kinds of reporting, because what an exciting way to merge two critical institutions in our country, public broadcasting and our community news. And the fact that this is happening here for the first time, I hope is something that you all can be really proud of and excited about, and share what you're learning and share your opinions as things go forward. Because this is your community, these are your resources, and we're just so excited that this is happening here. We think it's a great place.
And any journalist who's worked in Texas will tell you it's a fertile environment to work in.
With regard to the print edition, I have continued to take the print and the digital, and my compliments on what you did with the digital. It was wonderful to keep the format like a traditional newspaper, so I adjusted very easily to it. But I've wondered, have you considered, in keeping that print edition, how important that might be in the event of a cybersecurity attack that knocks out the internet? If you keep that going, at least there's an alternative way of communicating with people once a week, as opposed to China knocking out our internet and no communication. So I'm in favor of keeping that model, and I wonder if you consider that issue of cybersecurity.
Say that I have not gone that deep in trying to maintain the print edition for that, but my answer to that would be, well, we're going to look at everything before we make a change. We're not going to make, as I said earlier, we're not making a change to anything related to the print thing overnight, but what we're looking at is the runway of that. And at some point, there becomes an intersection of where it makes sense to continue to print and it doesn't, and we're not there yet, but every newspaper in the country is going to be looking at this. And if we're not unique with the challenge we have with print, I mean, every newspaper has that challenge, and they have it pretty dramatically. Some of them don't want to tell you how tough it is, but it is tough. And I have talked to several of my peers that have been extremely interested in the model that we've put out there, and they're starting to implement that model in their markets. And I would expect that you will see the model that we adopted a few years ago become the norm in the next several years.
Emphasis right now is on getting as many resources as you can. I'm wondering, just from a practical standpoint, after the acquisition takes place, realistically, do you see a significant boost in the kind of resources that you'll have to tell those stories? And let me predicate that by saying, I'm a former newspaper guy myself, and I understand the challenges that Bill and Sean have. Sometimes you have multiple meetings the same night. If you already have a small staff, I understand the challenges in trying to get to cover everything that you need to cover in a small amount of space. Do you think this will result in a higher yield of resources to apply toward all the things that you need to cover to get the hyper-local news that you are striving for?
Yeah, over time, that's what we think will happen, but I think it'll take a minute. We're starting to do some fundraising to get to the acquisition. Some of that will help determine what we can invest in it from day one. From a staging standpoint, we've got a lot of back office work and integration to do. We've got to get the newsrooms working together fully in sync. then I think we'll start really deploying a lot of our different channels to cross-promote and start building audience together. And we think that will start to result in some more resources. So we're really looking at it across 3 or 4 different stages. So we do think it will result in more resources, but it might not be from day one.
And we do have, obviously, 2 great universities here in a community college, and we have worked to draw from those resources and have internship programs and all. And one of the things that I hope this will allow us to do is to continue to grow those and get more students involved in helping us cover. There's a lot of different ways we can try to attack it as we kind of work our way through everything.
One more question, maybe? Going once?
So do you plan to expand like video, those types of things, like how soon do you think we can see those types of things being implemented? Or is it going to be just based on if you're able to continue getting more money?
I mean, there'll be some pretty immediate steps there. One of the things we'll probably come to is start training some of the Denton Record-Chronicle staff on audio in particular first. We'll ease into it a little bit. We'll do things that help feed our newscasts on KERA. You know, it's short, like 30, 45-second stories that are a little easier to produce to get people used to it. We'll train them to do 2 ways, which are just like live interviews with some of our hosts. I think those are 2 really easy ways that aren't too much of a lift. They won't interfere with a lot of the work they're doing now to get them used to audio a little bit. And as that settles in, I think we'll be able to start thinking more about, well, are there audio products? Do we want to be putting out podcasts together or things like that? Video will probably take a little bit longer, but again, we'll stage it starting with some lighter pieces of audio that can help get the team used to that and being a little more multi-platform in their work.
That is certainly one of my hopes, that we can continue to expand that out further. You know, that's one of the challenges we've had, as some of these communities that have been smaller for so long have continued to grow, and they have a multitude of issues that come up. And so we try to touch on some of those now, but our hope is that we can continue to add to and expand on that.
I think there's room as we try to stretch up north a little bit more, and the Denton Record-Chronicle tries to stretch south a little bit. You know, we've got partners in Fort Worth who are starting to explore a little more of northern Tarrant County. So I think we'd all love to do that. It's just a question of resources and where we deploy them, but we'd love to spend a little more time there.
All right. Thank you guys all for spending the time to come out tonight. Does anybody else have a question? Sorry. Oh, no. We had somebody out directing traffic earlier to try to get people in from the other side of the building. So thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. Appreciate your time. We appreciate your input and feedback, and we'll continue to stay in touch. So have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.